USCHO.com.
Welcome to a special Sunday edition of USCHO Weekend Review for Sunday, March 24th, 2024. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets today. We're going to talk a bit about the 6 championships, and it was interesting. On Friday night, there were 4,096 possible scenarios going into that. And by Saturday, it all came down to what Denver and Omaha did to see who was going where in the national tournament. And we're going to go through some of the championship games. The one that was played on Friday, which I think was a really smart move by the CCHA and Commissioner Don Lucia. Chase Pietala and Rylan Mosley scored to overcome a 1-0 early deficit and win 2-1 for Michigan Tech over the host Bemidji State. The goalie, Blake Pietala, made 34 saves in the victory.
Yeah, I'll start here. That was a great start to the weekend. Good crowd. They sold every one of their tickets. They were in white. Bemidji was in white. Like we were talking before the show, they flew Ben Holden in for the play-by-play, and unbiased, big name college hockey announcer. There was a feel of electricity starting the weekend off. I asked Tom Serratori earlier in the week why they went Friday. And he said, quite honestly, they wanted to be the first one to punch their ticket. They wanted to be the show and have the first bid and get themselves some more buys basically out of Flow Sports and some different things like that, and get some more PR. I'll tell you, it lived up to its billing. It did everything it needed to do. Great hockey game. Unfortunately, there had to be a loser in that game because both teams were good. And Blake Pietala, like you said, was outstanding, and it was a great kickoff to the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a great goaltending performance. That's what really stands out from that one. And the fact that it was a 2-1 game for a long time. That ended up being the final score. Congratulations to Joe Sean and his team and what they were able to accomplish. At times this year, as many teams in that league felt, because it was so close, it was like, are they struggling? Are they down and out? But they came back, played really strong down the stretch, ended up winning that championship game. Back to the dance for them. I believe this is 3 in a row for them, 2 at-larges and now a league championship and automatic qualifier. That's pretty impressive out of the CCHA.
And they were going out listing all their different trophies they won. They won it's 3 to 4 different trophies, different names of trophies within leagues they've won it. Like you said, hats off to them, because it was a pick'em, and they got to the point where they needed to, and we talked all year. They were so tight in the standings, and Bemidji went on that run, and they obviously lost the wrong game, unfortunately for them.
You mentioned Friday being the only game in town, the numbers on Flow. What about for Michigan Tech now? They get an extra day of rest before having to travel.
Yeah, I think that's also something that you could figure into with getting another day of rest, because it is a grind. I will say their league only went with a 1 game on in the semifinals, so it wasn't as big a grind as it was, let's say, for the Atlantic Hockey Champion, where you had to continually win 2 out of 3 series. But that being said, they do get the extra day of rest. They are going to travel. They are probably going to travel some distance, if I read Jimmy's bracketology correctly, and it's always good to have an extra day of rest this time of year.
Let's turn to the ECAC up at Lake Placid. On Friday, it was an upset by St. Lawrence over Quinnipiac, which just seems unable to get it done for the White Law Cup. But Jonathan Castagna scored twice for Cornell as they beat Cinderella St. Lawrence 3-1. First of all, hats off to St. Lawrence. Some doubts on them, but I saw some things in them earlier in the season. I thought that they might be able to contend. But for Cornell, this is a pretty good statement. First league championship for them since 2010.
And the cut line is 13. Just like that, 13. We'll go back and forth. 13 it is, Jimmy. Let's go. Oh, yeah. So, no, Yeah. No, another good one to start off the weekend, and you could just see it coming. You just couldn't see Quinnipiac get anything going. And St. Lawrence was smothering. Only, I think, less than 50 attempts on goal for Quinnipiac. And Rand obviously came out and said that was embarrassing and was pretty critical of not being prepared and ready to go for a big game. And you're right, Brent Brecky did a great job, and they did show signs of life. And then congratulations to Mike Schaefer. I couldn't believe when they said that on the broadcast, the first regular season championship since 2010. And that was, but that's a dangerous team right there. With Shane and Nat, they've got a lot of freshmen that are playing really well. Castagna had the goals, and they battled some adversity, and those are good things. And Brent Brecky, Mike Schaefer coached both Brent Brecky and myself at Western Michigan, so I know that was a little bittersweet. I read some comments that they made about each other, and both good people. And yeah, I would have liked to see both of them go on because of my relationship and playing 4 years of college with Brent. But another good weekend.
Yeah, inexplainable, the Quinnipiac factor in Lake Placid and Atlantic City, for that matter. I mean, they've struggled in this tournament, no matter what it is. But you tip your hat to St. Lawrence. They had beat them once earlier this year up in North Country, and then they win a big game on a big stage. But Cornell scares me. That is a team. If I have to face them in the NCAA tournament, I'm worried. They're a prototypical Cornell, heavy, lot of skill, and great goaltending. So again, I actually hadn't heard that stat about 2010. I hadn't looked it up. That is remarkable that it's been this long since they've won the Whitelaw Cup. That's a very good hockey team to not have taken that trophy for 14 years.
And can you imagine if they were a 4 seed? They snuck into potentially a 3 seed.
Yeah, they are.
We don't know for sure. Yeah. Until we actually get it, they're going to be at 3. But can you imagine if that was a 4 seed? That the number 4 overall seed in the tournament might have been not really excited about that matchup.
Let's turn to Atlantic hockey. RIT won its first Atlantic Hockey Trophy since 2016. Kind of a wild first period. A couple of goals for Jordan Byro from AIC. He scored on a breakaway and then deflected a shot that had deflected a couple of times before that. 2-2 at the end of one period. Tigers got a game winner power play goal from freshman Matthew Wild, who also got one of the empty net goals and has 19 goals on the season. But RIT got 2 empty net goals late and won that one 5-2, and the Tigers advanced for the first time since 2016.
I watched that game, obviously, and I'm sick of hearing about 2016. Okay, let's move on. Let's not talk about that anymore.
Sorry.
They were trying to throw highlights of it, and it was turning away from the screen. But no, that was really weird hockey game. Our AIC came out and got the first one, and RIT kind of looked a little lackluster, and it took them a little bit to get in their game. And then once they got to 2-1, you thought, okay, RIT is going to pull away, and AIC got that late goal and 2-2 after one, and then the power play goal that, like you said, Wild scored, and then AIC had. I thought they controlled the play in the third period. I haven't seen RIT on the defense like they had been, and they were playing protect. And AIC went with the goal, had a power play, and then pulled the goalie fairly early, had some chances. And then once the empty net happened, the place exploded. But RIT was on the defensive in that. And that's another team that I don't know if there's a number 4 seed that anybody really is going to want to face in this tournament, because they are dangerous. And this is a team, and we've all talked about it, Ed, you know it. They've kind of let themselves down the last couple of years in losing, and this was something that they had put a lot of pressure on themselves to do. And now that they did it, they're going to play free, and they're going to play loose against a very high seed.
I think that's why we always see at least one number 1 seed go down in the opening round of the NCAAs, because these 4 seeds so often come in on a big high, find a way to just play loose and play their game. Even the teams like UMass, that was the last team in as an at-large, they probably thought that they were dead 3-4 times this weekend, and they were, it seemed. So to make the tournament, they're going to play loose, and they're going to be, again, the gambling term I always go back to, playing with the house's money. When you don't feel like you have anything to lose, that is the most dangerous team you have to face in an NCAA tournament. So, but hats off to Wayne Wilson and his staff. Great guy, great coach, to find himself back in the winner's circle.
Did you feel that, Ed, though, that they were because they haven't been on the defensive very much lately? And I thought in the third period, they were a little tight and trying to get that to the finish line.
They looked at times, and I didn't have a chance to talk in any detail about it, but it looked to me like they had set up like a 3-2 at center ice, something like that. They were trying to really slow the progress of AIC into the zone, and it did get more defensive, it seems. Yeah.
Which isn't their strength. And you're going to see, I would say the over is going to come into play when RIT plays in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, the empty net goals make the over.
Yeah,
it was an
right.
over-under of 6.
We talked about that in Edge, that Eric Lang does like to pull his goaltender early when they trail, pulls it, gives up a couple, and you go from a 5 to a 7.
But definitely hats off to AIC. They were missing a couple of players. They did get a couple back who they had said might not be back this season. And they came out with a game plan designed to do what teams need to do against RIT.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of knowing, be familiar against some teams, and they knew how they were going to play against them. When we were able to do that for 2 periods in game 1, and it's just they got all the fifth years on RIT right now. And I just keep coming back to this is their year, and this is their time, and we'll see how they do it moving forward. But congratulations to Wayne and Hilsey and David Salako for their championship.
Turning to Hockey East, I get to catch a bit of it on Friday night in the semifinals. And Jim, a sold-out Boston Garden, or TD Garden, for that was amazing. But it was Will Smith, the freshman phenom, on a team of freshman phenoms, scoring 4 goals, a championship game record for Hockey East. BC, a 6-2 win over Boston University, number 1 and number 2 in the poll, in the pairwise, in the seedings. It must have been phenomenal there at TD Garden.
It was, but, man, did BC just dominate the entire weekend. 8-1 victory over UMass on Friday, then a 6-2 win on Saturday. BC's power play came into the weekend 2 for its last 18. They end up going 6 for 9, I believe, on the weekend on the power play, including their first 4 last night, 4 straight against BU. And that's a pretty good BU penalty kill. I remember well, because it was my first year in college hockey, when Maine nearly ran the table. They had 1 loss the entire season. That was a dog. No, they lost to Boston University back in 1992-93. It was a 41-1-2 overall record. But I remember that team and how dominant they could be. And they got to the Garden and were not as dominant as BC was this weekend, and did not have to play the number 2 team in the country, the number 2 team in the pairwise. I mean, that's how dominant is the only word I can keep using to describe Boston College this weekend. Does it continue? Who knows? The NCAA tournament can change a lot of things and a lot of fate. But if they can continue to play that, and getting Gabe Perreault back and healthy in the lineup helped a lot. That put their lines back together, especially their top 2 lines. And it showed. That freshman line, I don't know what they ended up with for the weekend, but I'm going to say it was somewhere around 23, 24 points.
We talked about this before, Jimmy, and you asked me if I enjoyed watching hockey, and I did. I really liked the staggered starts because you could see a piece of every game. You could see a little bit of it. But there was so much going on Friday with the women's Frozen Four, NCAA basketball. You're trying to pick and choose. And next thing you know, you turn away and you got a close game that just explodes. And then the same thing, you're a little late on watching the RIT game because that's a 7. And then the BC game's a 7:30. And you turn on a little late. Next thing you know, it's 2-0. I mean, that was an explosive offense. And you said it. This is a team that they're going to have to perform on the big stage. But we're going to be talking about East this year, potentially in the Frozen Four. With if these two teams, BU and BC, keep going, and instead of talking about the dominance of the Big Ten, we did that last year, didn't we? So we'll see where it goes, but it's looking like Hockey East is going to be has got the inside track to basically to St. Paul.
I had 4 browser windows going with games on Friday with only audio on one of them. If you have the audio on them, all of them, it's impossible. But yeah, I was bouncing around. It was kind of cool, sort of like watching the NCAA regionals. Quick question, Jim. After the 8-1 loss, Greg Carville was a little critical about the lack of time to practice on the TD Garden ice. He said the Minutemen didn't get to do it and pointed out that BC had played there several times this year. Is there trouble? Is there a scheduling issue of being able to get teams out on the TD Garden ice for the tournament?
It was tough this year because the Bruins played at home on Thursday night, so there was no ice available in the daytime. And I'm not sure if the two teams that came from out of town, Maine and UMass, I was told it kind of intentionally came a little later in the day. I'm not sure if they got there early in the morning or came in the day before. Would they have gotten morning ice at the Garden? But by the time I think everything was said and done. That said, I do believe that according to the league that all teams were offered ice on Friday morning. UMass chose not to take a morning skate. So I thought that was a little strange of a comment. He talked about just, BC and BU being used to playing there, but they were there 2 years ago in the Hockey East finals and won the championship. It didn't seem to affect their team then. So I thought that's comment struck me as a little bit strange.
And I was wrong, Jimmy. It was BU, like you said, but they did tie Clarkson that.
They tied Clarkson, tied Providence, lost to BU 7-6 in overtime. Yes.
Let's turn to the Big Ten. One of the leagues that had an on-campus championship game and terrific crowd and a terrific game going to overtime is Michigan State. Down Michigan 5-4 on overtime on Patrick Geary's goal, 13:47 of overtime. It's the first Big Ten title for Michigan State.
And listen, talk about capping it off the right way. We've talked about Michigan State since day one this season. In a very tough Big Ten conference, we weren't sure who was really going to emerge. Would Michigan and Minnesota keep their dominance going? Well, no, Wisconsin and Michigan State got up there. Great job by Michigan to get to the championship game, take Michigan State to overtime on enemy ice, but you find the game winner, and that's a celebration for Michigan State. That's something their fans will remember for a very long time because it's been quite some time since they've won a postseason championship with that team. So, hats off Adam Nightingale and his staff, and it's a sign of good things to come there. The renovation at Munn this year, we've talked about a number of times, and you're talking about moving everything on up. And I'm not sure that people thought that Michigan State could do it that quickly. But Adam Nightingale has done a fantastic job.
Yeah, they're back. I mean, it comes down to the fact of another really good game and another regular season champion that actually went through and won the playoffs, and that's hard to do. And especially in the Big Ten where it was all one. They didn't have to play a quarterfinal, did they? Did Michigan State?
No, they had the bye. They had the bye.
Yeah, they had the bye. So their pressure was, they had to come out pretty quickly and dive right into pressure. And one game is tough. And granted, they're one game, they still move. They're going to the tournament, but you get your rivals and you get Michigan in the building and exciting crowd. And it was a good hockey game back and forth. And another one where Michigan took a big lead and Michigan State had to get that kind of a seeing eye shot off the goalpost to win. And I really liked the celebration. I really liked after he scored, he took his helmet off and threw it about 30 feet in the air. You have another game, but I guess when you win the Big Ten championship, you can buy a new helmet.
Big Ten has helmet budgets. NCHC. This is the game that happened latest. It was the game everybody was watching because if Omaha had won, Colorado College would have been in the tournament and would have made things easier scheduling in Springfield. Denver winning got UMass into the tournament by like the 5th decimal place in the RPI. McCade Webster scored twice early in the second period to give DU a lead that they never gave up in a 4-1 win over Omaha, a game where Omaha led early 1-0.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, everybody, if you're an NCHC fan, obviously you were watching for the game. Everybody else in the country was watching to figure out who was going to be that last team. And, the irony, I was talking with Tim Bruley, the publisher of USCHO, and he does a lot of the math behind the scenes on the pairwise. And he called me early yesterday morning. He said, I'm going to put a 5th and 6th decimal place in the RPI because I don't want people to think that there's a tie because they see 4 decimal places and the numbers are identical. That was what would have happened if Colorado College had gotten in over UMass. It would have gone to the 6th, maybe even the 7th decimal place to separate it. As it turned out, it ended up only needing 4 decimal places. And boy, it was a blowaway. UMass got in by 4 10,000ths of a percentage point. I mean, that's massive compared to what could have been a millionth of a percentage point was what they were looking at. So I think the win for Denver is huge, especially, for David Carl. Never led on Friday. Had to find ways to come back from 4 1-goal deficits, to get to that championship game, won the game in overtime, then trailed again on Saturday. I've heard David say it a couple of times this season on some of the TV broadcasts I've watched that he's got a young team and they make mistakes. And they found a way to not make mistakes late in that game last night, able to put that one away when it was in the balance.
First of all, Colorado College had an outstanding year. They're the team that's the first team out, and they've got a good future ahead of them, and with what they've got going there. But I'll tell you, when Omaha scored that first goal, they get that first goal. I guarantee you, Colorado Springs really excited about that. And how ironic is it that Colorado College's big rival Denver is the one that got to knock them out. And it was a good game. It was a good hockey game. I thought the ending, once it became 3-0, it was a little anticlimactic. I really thought the whole third period, because Denver did kind of shut them down, and I think they only gave up 15 shots the whole game. You knew that Denver was going to win. You didn't see much from Omaha that had a lot of pushback. They were going to need a bounce. They were going to need something, a power play to get that goal going. But Denver was just smothered. They were really good, and you knew that once they got the 2-1 lead, and then they extended it to 3-1, it was the end of the time for Colorado College.
Yeah, I will tell you, the CC not making it, when you look at some of the numbers, against top 15 teams, they had 9 wins. UMass only had 1. So I went in and I said, oh, well, UMass must just had a much stronger strength of schedule. CC had the stronger schedule. They had almost identical overall records. So it does show the quirks of the pairwise system. It was the losses of individual comparisons to other teams, not anything really else than that. That was what cost CC. But they put together a really, really impressive resume to not get it. I think if this was basketball and there was some subjectivity to it, I bet the committee would put CC over UMass. And if they didn't, then we'd have a Virginia situation from a Sunday ago, and people would be up in arms. How do you put Virginia in? They're not supposed to be there. That's almost where we're looking with UMass and CC, where you're saying, how do you put UMass in when CC had such an impressive resume? But Chris, he'll get there again. He'll get there soon.
I would almost say that maybe the committee should have leeway on the last call because of how a team's playing. You go by the pairwise all the way. Obviously, you're going to take the auto. They have one, let's say, bullet that they can use to change something. And
it would make the selection show a little bit more
interesting.
Yeah. You just there's not a lot for the committee to do now in terms of selecting. It's more just where you're sending teams.
Well, you could throw back in the record against teams under consideration or the record in the last 20 games like they used to have. That might be enough to juggle that just a little bit.
Oh, it absolutely would have. If you had that, there's no doubt that you would have seen a totally different field. There would have been other teams in the at-large bubble there. But I think schools, that should be your number one talking point in Naples this May when you're down there.
Yeah, I don't have the stroke for that one. We're not around the top 16.
But just kind of start mentioning it in those,
I have bigger
bar on Monday night, and then by the time you're in the Wednesday's meetings, maybe it'll come out.
You're there. I mean, you've got more of a. I got bigger fish to fry on things that
you do.
I'm gonna talk about than changing the comparison. I think that it's interesting if you just give that leeway just for one choice, how much different it would make that selection Sunday.
Well, you remember all the flack you guys got during the COVID year. You're inviting that every year for the committee, which is fine now that you're no longer on the committee. You're the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, I'm the one that gets to criticize and talk about this now. That's the exciting thing about it. Yeah, I haven't missed a Frozen Four now since in a while because I get to do this and the committee before that.
Well, we're going to take a break and we'll talk a little bit about what the committee is doing today to put together a bracket. And then we'll look at Jimmy's bracket from last night in bracketology. I've seen a couple other different ones out there, but I think you're going by the book and how you do it. We'll see if that's indeed the case. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Where are my hockey fans at? Present. Welcome to Fandom 101. It's NCAA Ice Hockey Championship time when the hottest teams in the country face off under one roof. Be there to see your squad hoist the ultimate trophy overhead. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th in St. Paul, Minnesota. Attendance is encouraged. Passion is mandatory. Buy your seats today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
We're back with USCHO Weekend Review, this special Sunday Selection Sunday edition. Derek, you served on the Division I Men's Ice Hockey Committee and were part of Selection Sunday for a few years. What's today like for the committee, and how do they approach it in a real year, unlike the one COVID year, which I mentioned before? But how do they approach this? They've got numbers and everything. What do they do with it?
Well, by now they're done. Usually what will happen is they'll have an idea of the brackets going into Friday. They'll potentially, and like we met a lot more during the COVID than we did when we were in Buffalo. But they have a formula. They've got an idea of where everybody is. You meet going into the tournament. Sometimes you'll meet after Friday or Saturday morning leading into it. And then they probably met again last night and they had an idea, or if they thought they were pretty close where everything was pretty close going into Saturday, they might have just postponed until Sunday. And here, then they're talking about a whole bunch of different things. Everything that you've heard right now, interconference matchups, bracket integrity, attendance, who's going to travel, where they're going to go. I mean, so you're going to have a whole bunch of different conversations leading into that. But going into today, they had a pretty good idea of the direction that they were going to go leading there. So all the different people that are thrown out, including yours, Jimmy, they had an idea going into it. They had a skeleton, how they were going to play it and how they were going to move things, and had an idea. And Jeff Schulman's smart. I was on the committee with them for a year. He'll take a really good look at it. And you've got a lot of different factors on where you're going to see things turn out. But they had a skeleton. They probably met 2 to 3 times over this weekend. And they're done by now. Everything's in. During COVID, we were actually in the Zoom. And we found out one of the teams of St. Lawrence at that time was going to have to drop out. And then we had to bring a team back in. So that was a little different. Like I said, there was your one moving part. But you guys, everybody's done a really good job in bringing out their thoughts of where they're going to go. But they already had a pretty good idea leading into their last meeting.
Well, Jim, why don't we talk a little bit about your bracketology before we wrap up? And by the way, we are scheduled to talk with Jeff Schulman, the Vermont Athletic Director and Chairman of the committee, to have kind of a look back on the decision process. But Jim, first thing you did was take bracket integrity, and then you found a couple of issues in the first round. North Dakota and Omaha cannot face off, so you had to do some juggling. And then you also had to make sure you placed UMass in Springfield because they're the host school. So you came up with a bracket that had to have a couple of swaps, but looks pretty close to having very close to bracket integrity.
Yeah, the one thing that, as I've been doing this throughout the season, that the last couple of months, every week you put together a bracket based on the current pairwise. And one of the things I in my last couple of iterations really struggled to get the number 1 seeds playing the correct number 4 seeds. So number 1 plays number 16, number 2 plays number 15, number 3 plays number 14, number 4 plays number 13. That was getting really difficult. So last night when I went in, I made that. You had to make one swap right away. I swapped Omaha and Michigan. That kept from having North Dakota facing Omaha. So once I got that done, I looked at it. I said, geez, I could stop here, but attendance isn't going to be very good. You had a good look in Providence in terms of attendance. Maybe you had it okay with UMass out in Springfield, but maybe not that great. Sioux Falls was a concern for me, and Maryland Heights, not a big building, so I wasn't too concerned. So what I did at that point was just take 2 pairings, exact pairings, and swap them. I took a North Dakota, which was supposed to play Michigan in Springfield in my first bracket, had them swap with Maine and Cornell, who were supposed to play in Maryland Heights. So that brought Maine and Cornell back into an Eastern region. It put North Dakota and Michigan in Maryland Heights a little closer. Listen, there's not a lot of close teams to Maryland Heights. So I was just trying to do something that would get teams in closer proximity. And then when I looked at it, I said, you know what? I'm done. There's nothing else to change. You had that number 1 seeds playing the correct number 4 seeds. That is something that the committee really seems to have harped on in the last few years. Once I got all of that done, that's where I just stopped. There's other swaps you could make, certainly. I like the thought of getting a lot of teams closer to home. The other one I'll mention, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Obviously, you lose North Dakota in that region because Omaha is the host. They can't play Omaha in the opening round. So you lose North Dakota from that region. I really wanted to make sure, and it just happened to work out this way, that another close team, Minnesota, only 4.5 hours away by car. That's not too long of a drive for those Gopher fans. They'll make that drive.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I'm going to play what everybody else is out there asking. Why can't you get North Dakota there? Besides the Omaha, why else? Because we talked about this before the show. Not everybody may not know this, because ideally you would want North Dakota in Sioux Falls.
Sure. But the only way the committee can do that is to go against their own guidance, the rules that they set for how to seed this tournament. You can't change North Dakota and make them a number 1 seed. They're currently 6 overall, so that's a 2 seed. You can't change Omaha and take them out from a 3 seed and make them a 4 seed because they're number 11 overall. And because there are only 4 teams from the NCHC in the tournament, that is the point. You are allowed to potentially keep 2 teams in an interconference matchup in the first round if there are 5 teams. And even then it says the committee may. It doesn't say shall or must. It says may keep that interconference matchup intact to protect bracket integrity. We don't have any of those criteria met here. So I just can't see a way. If the committee does find a way to put North Dakota in Sioux Falls when the show goes off at 6:30 tonight, they're basically breaking their own rules.
Well, there goes if Colorado College would have been in, there would have been 5.
It would have made things easier to leave North Dakota in Sioux Falls.
So, Jim, I have a question for you. Have you created the opposite of an attendance problem in Maryland Heights? 2,500 seats in that facility. You've got Michigan State, North Dakota, Michigan, and Western Michigan all within reasonable travel distance and all with great fan bases.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the regionals being held there was going to be a challenge if you got 4 good teams. That's not what the committee is supposed to worry about. They're supposed to worry about making sure the building's packed. You're going to have a packed building with these 4 teams. So will it create a massive demand for tickets? Yes. Does the NCAA mind that? Probably not.
We knew that. I was on the committee back then. This is done to give St. Louis an opportunity to host something before the Frozen Four next year.
Yeah,
this is kind of their start for the St. Louis Sports Commission. And we knew that the building was small, but we also believed that they've earned it. St. Louis is a great hockey town. They have been bidding year after year after year. And let's give them something to work for. It's almost like a practice.
Yeah.
And Centena is a beautiful building, and it will be exciting there. It will be right on top of everything. It will be an exciting weekend of hockey in Maryland Heights.
Well, that's going to wrap up this special edition of USCHO Weekend Review. We'll have another episode if we're able, as scheduled, to talk with Jeff Schulman from University of Vermont, the chairman of the committee. And then on Monday, our regular edition of Weekend Review as we look at the picks and look ahead to the regionals in the NCAAs. This podcast has been sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets today. For Jim Connelly, for Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been a special edition of USCHO Weekend Review.